Going into winter meetings, what are the Cubs' positions of need? We're going to talk about that on this episode. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Maybe you got a whole refrigerator full of leftovers. We don't consider you guys leftovers. We think you are the cream of the crop. You're fresh out of the oven. We want you to be part of the Cubs baseball channel. Like and subscribe. And if you like Cubs content, give it the thumbs up. And also hit the bell so you know when we're dropping new content. What do you say, everybody? Welcome to the Cubs baseball channel. Let's talk a little bit of Cubs going into winter meetings. Jed Hoyer, Carter Hawkins, the Cubs front office. What are they going to do to try to make this team better? Well, I think it starts with a couple of spots in the infield, and I don't think any of you guys would disagree with me. First base and third base. What are the Cubs going to do with those two positions? Well, first base, you got a couple of options, maybe in the minor leagues. Matt Mervis, we got a little cup of coffee of Matt Mervis last year in the big leagues. Things didn't work out too well for him, but he just peppers the league in the minors. And so a lot of people feel like the guy is really close to being good. It's just a matter of figuring it out at the next level. Last year, the Cubs brought in Trey Mancini, Eric Hosmer. Those two guys didn't work out. Then we saw Mervis. That didn't work out. Didn't feel like David Ross was a big fan of that anyway. And then Cody Bellinger manned first until the Jamer Candelario trade, and then he kind of played the corner infield spots. But what's the long-term fix? The Cubs are looking for that long-term solution at first base into Anthony Rizzo. And so I think that as far as, going out and find someone, Rhys Hoskins is a guy's name's come up. He strikes out a lot. He's not a great defender, but he can hit. I'm not sure right now. Maybe you re-sign Cody Bellinger, and instead of him playing center field, he plays first base. I thought he did a really good job playing first base and in the outfield last year. But it's going to be tough to sign him. I mean, we've talked about it extensively on this channel. He's got Scott Boras as an agent. Who wants to deal with an agent that says, I want to talk to the owner. I don't want to talk to the front office guys. Get those guys out of here. And I'm too important to deal with them. I'm going to cut out the middleman. So as this thing progresses, we'll see what happens. I mean, the Cubs are still in the mix for him. Obviously, they're going after Shohei Ohtani. We talked about Pete Alonso with the Mets being a trade possibility, and that's certainly a rumor that's kind of been circulated. Bruce Levine talked about that. So we'll find out. First base. Then you swing over to third base. Matt Chapman is a free agent. He was with the A's, and then he was with the Blue Jays. Is he someone that the Cubs will want to sign? If they sign him, they're going to block all of those guys they have in the minor leagues who don't have a position now because you got the middle infield locked up with Dansby Swanson and Nico Horner, right? So is that Matt Shaw, your first-round pick from last year? I say a couple of years ago last year. The guy was at the University of Maryland, and then he was in Double-A, and he did a pretty good job. I don't think he's ready for the big leagues, but he's definitely a player with a ton of potential. B.J. Murray, we talked about him. Is he an option at third base? Jake Slaughter, is that a guy who was in Iowa last year that you want to put at third base? Do you go out and sign someone? Do you trade for someone? I mean, we were talking about Dante Bichette's son, Bo, right? Why not? Why not Bo Bichette? I mean, let's throw him over there at third base from the Blue Jays, and you'd have to give up a pretty good ransom to get him. I mean, he's a big leaguer who has had success, a lot of hits. He would be a great piece. Nick Madrigal, is he going to be your third baseman? It was kind of like a rotation. I think we figured out that Patrick Wisdom isn't good enough defensively to play a position every single day. And that's the question about Christopher Morel. I mean, could you put him at third and could he figure it out? Or, are you just going to have someone over there that's just kicking the ball around all the time? So those are two corner infield spots that the Cubs got to figure out before next season. Then the other big question is in the outfield. Ian Happ, Gold Glover, he's locked down and left. Seiya Suzuki, signed. He had a good season. He's in right center field. You got Pete Crow Armstrong, who in some publications now is the number one prospect in all of baseball. Some people think he's that good. Now, He's the Cubs' number one prospect, and he's definitely a top 10 prospect. And what does it even matter? He's really good. He was the number one defensive player in all of the minor leagues last year. So you got him. You got Alexander Canario, who came up last year, had the 6 RBI game in his first start. That was a record or something, right? He can play really good defensive outfield. So what are you going to do with him? Kevin Alcantara, the center fielder that the Cubs got back from the Yankees in the Rizzo trade. He's in Double-A. He'll probably start in Double-A, but he's up and coming. The Jaguar, as they call him, he's a really good player, a top 10 Cubs prospect. What are you going to do with him? Owen Casey's a corner outfielder, but he's another outfielder that's pushing. So you got a lot of depth in the minor leagues in the outfield. And one of the biggest, things that I love about having Craig Counsell is that he brings a track record of working with young guys and getting them comfortable in the major leagues. So that gives you a lot of confidence there as far as the outfield is concerned. So you got to fill center field. And if you sign Cody Bellinger, maybe he's your center fielder. And then I don't know what you do with the rest of those guys, or you put him at first. Designated hitter, is another spot that you could actually go out and get someone to do. I don't like the idea of Christopher Morel being the DH. I think that you go out and get someone that's going to be on base and drive in runs and not strike out so much. I honestly, and I know some of you guys aren't going to like this. Harold Baines is my prototypical DH, the Hall of Famer, the guy that, spent a ton of time with the Sox and then with Baltimore and the Oakland A's. It's one of the best pure hitters I can ever remember. And it wasn't just the power. It was just the two-strike approach and him getting on base, being able to just, foul off, spoil a bunch of pitches. And he's a veteran guy felt like for a long time because of the bad knees. But yeah, I mean, he's someone that you got to look at and go, yeah, I mean, if you could find someone like him, obviously he's retired, but I love that guy that you put in the lineup and he's just a tough out. He's just on base all the time. He's driving in runs. And I know that throughout baseball, they feel like he might be the weakest Hall of Famer ever. He was one of the best DHs I can ever remember. And if I was like building a team, and I'm looking at like, hey, who do I want to kind of that prototypical spot? And who knows who was available, but I always put him at the top of the list. I also like guys like Manny Ramirez, obviously that could hit a ton of home runs and was clutch as well. But, having Christopher Morel not play a position is a waste because he's got so much natural, athleticism. You'd figure that you could find a spot for him, or maybe you trade him and bring someone else in. All right. You could use a little help at catcher. I don't think that that's something that the Cubs are going to really do right now. Yan Gomes re-signed. He's coming back. Miguel Amaya, Pablo Aliendo was the Double-A catcher. I would probably slot him into that third catcher spot for the Cubs. I think that there's still some weakness in the system as far as the backstop spot goes. But at the big league level, between those three guys, I think you got that handled, right? Then you go to pitching. They lost Marcus Stroman. So now they got to find another starter to fill into that spot. Now, they played their best baseball when he wasn't there. Remember that, right? So it was Javier Assad that was in the starting rotation. But what are you going to do? Right. I still think you got to go out and add another starter or two if you're the Cubs. You got some guys in the minor leagues. We talked about it before. Ben Brown, who, if he wouldn't have gotten injured last year, we probably would have seen him. You saw Jordan Wicks at the end of the year. He held his own. He did a good job. The left-hander. Cade Horton, I don't think he's going to be ready right away, but who knows what he does in the offseason. Maybe he comes in and he's pushing for playing time. We'll find out about that as well. But I think the Cubs are going to have to go out and add someone to the rotation. And so that's going to be interesting. That's a pretty high price to pay these days. But, obviously teams with pitching win, and teams with great pitching win championships. So that's where we are right now. The bullpen could use some help as well. You're always kind of mixing and matching with the bullpen. It feels like every year the bullpen that you start the season with really isn't what you have at the end of the season. And then when you look like a year or two back, it's a totally different bullpen. And I think that's that way all around baseball. If you get a couple of guys that kind of slot in there and do a good job, for a few years, you feel comfortable and you feel good about it. Like, maybe you got a value. And so We'll see what the Cubs do in that aspect. But you can build a bullpen on a shoestring budget these days. It's the starting pitching that really costs you a lot. And that's why you want to develop starting pitching, because it's going to save your piggy bank, right? Guys, thanks for hanging out with us here on the Cubs Baseball Channel. Keep the comments coming in. Some of you guys are pretty nice. Some of you guys come in and you're smart asses, but you know what? That's what this channel's all about. Whatever you want to throw out there, thank you for hanging out with us. And remember that right now, and I'm going to throw the graphic up, the channel is presented by the Tennessee Smokies and their team store, smokiesbaseball.com/store. They won their first championship since Harold Baines, ironically, was on their team back in 1978 as a young up-and-comer, a 19-year-old. And they're the Cubs AA affiliate now. Back then, they were the Sox. And they want you to go to their team store and pick up some gear like this pretty sweet hoodie. But great prices, some really cool gear, and that's smokiesbaseball.com/store. We'll talk to you guys again tomorrow unless something breaks. Go Cubs.